I'm Susan Euler. Did the ancient Egyptians really have blue eyes? Well, some of their sculptures did, but there's way more to this story, as we're about to find out. During the past several decades, there has been a lot of discussion concerning the race and ethnicity of the ancient Egyptians. This is perfectly understandable, since for years, especially in Europe and the United States, Egyptians have been frequently portrayed in ads, movies, and in scholarly research as light-skinned Caucasians, looking more like Northern Europeans than Middle Easterners or Africans. But this desire for whiteness is understandable as well. For 3,000 years, Egypt was the richest, most powerful nation in the Mediterranean world. Modern people, both black and white, feel a strong kinship with that ancient society and want to be a part of all its remembered glory and glamour. So they turn to sculptures and paintings as evidence that the ancient Egyptians must have looked like them. Often cited, at least by white people, is the fact that a number of sculptures depict the ancient Egyptians with blue eyes. Blue eyes mean Caucasian, right? Well, no. White, black, and brown people can have blue eyes, although brown eyes are far more common overall, even among whites. But good news! Ancient Egypt was a very cosmopolitan society and included people of different races, backgrounds, and ethnicities. However, although some ancient Egyptians may have had blue eyes, artworks show us that most had brown eyes. And although some may have had light skin, the vast majority had black or brown skin. Egyptian tomb paintings, mummy portraits, and sculptures from all eras, the Old Kingdom through the Roman period, makes this very clear. We must not fall into the trap of thinking about race, skin, hair, and eye color in modern terms when we discuss ancient Egypt, or any ancient culture for that matter. The ancient world was very different from our own, and our notions of race did not apply. As archaeologist and author of the Emily Peabody books, Dr. Barbara Mertz so eloquently explains it, Egyptian civilization was not Mediterranean or African, Semitic or Hamitic, black or white, but all of them. It was, in short, Egyptian. So everyone should feel a part of this story. But spoiler alert, the blue eyes depicted in ancient Egyptian sculptures have nothing to do with race, ethnicity, or for that matter, real life. They are symbolic. Egypt is in Africa, and the history of ancient Egypt is part of African history. 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, northern Africa was a fertile savanna. Rock drawings depict giraffes, elephants, and the other familiar African animals, as well as the people themselves, who flourished in the region for thousands of years. But the climate continued to warm, rainfall patterns changed, and lakes and rivers gradually dried up. By 4000 BC, the grasslands had become the Sahara Desert. This triggered a huge migration of peoples from North Africa, as well as from the sub-Saharan regions, such as today's Sudan. These migrants settled in the fertile Nile Valley, joining the people who already lived there. Thus, from as far back as the Neolithic period, the New Stone Age, Egypt had a diverse population comprised of people with genetic and cultural roots in different parts of Africa. And because Egypt is contiguous with the Middle East, it is a part of that story as well. Archaeological evidence shows that the Neolithic population of Egypt also had much in common with the people of the Middle East, culturally as well as genetically. One of Egypt's most prominent Neolithic civilizations was the Naquata culture, located along the Nile from the Nubian border, today's Sudan, to the middle of what is now modern Egypt. The Naquata culture is known for its distinctive pottery, as well as for its burials, which include pottery, many of which depict funeral scenes. In Naquata culture, we first see two symbols that will become an important part of ancient Egyptian beliefs for the next 3,000 years: blue-eyed sculptures and the Ka symbol. Written during historic times as a hieroglyph of upraised arms, the Ka signifies protection of the soul of the dead. In this sculpture of an Egyptian pharaoh dating from 1750 BC, some 2,000 years later than the Naquata period, we see both a Ka symbol and blue eyes. So, the two symbols are intertwined. Sculptures like these are often used to argue that a mysterious race of blue-eyed, white-skinned Nordic types lived in Egypt during ancient times and then disappeared without a trace. Was it because these blue-eyed people were space aliens, as some have actually suggested? No, on both counts. But the sky and the stars do play a role in the story. But let's pause for a moment to consider the meaning of modern figurines, or dolls, or action figures if you prefer. Do we seriously believe that these figures represent the actual appearance and physical characteristics of real, living human beings? Of course not. At the beginning of the Bronze Age, around 3100 BC, King Narmer unified the two regions, Upper and Lower Egypt, into one country. Narmer himself was from Upper Egypt and was probably dark-skinned, since he was from the south where many sub-Saharan Africans had settled and probably always lived. However, the person he defeated may have been more Middle Eastern in appearance, but this is impossible to say because we really know nothing about him except that he was from the land where the papyrus grows, that is, the Nile Delta. Narmer founded what is known as Dynasty I. Only 200 years later, during the Third Dynasty and the reign of King Djoser, Egypt entered the beginning of the Pyramid Age. The Pyramid Age lasted some 500 years and is known as the Old Kingdom. Not only was the Old Kingdom the heyday of pyramid building, it was also when most of the blue-eyed Egyptian sculptures were created. Here are the portraits of Prince Rahotep and his wife Nofret. Rahotep was the brother of King Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Rahotep has reddish-brown skin, but his wife has pale skin. This is not about race, but an artistic convention, showing that Nofret was an aristocrat who did not need to work out in the sun and get a tan. Their very realistic eyes are made of rock crystal, and they are blue. Here's another portrait of Rahotep, and he has brown eyes. So what's going on here? Not only with Rahotep, but with all those other blue-eyed sculptures from the Old Kingdom. For years I wondered about this, and nothing I read seemed to provide the answer. Then one day, I was listening to an interview with crime writer and former medical examiner Patricia Cornwell. Cornwell was explaining about how difficult it is to identify unknown dead bodies, and she said, you can't even tell the eye color. The interviewer asked, why not? And Cornwell answered, well, due to post-mortem changes, all dead people have blue eyes. That was it. I knew it. These blue-eyed Old Kingdom sculptures, by the way, are not of living people. They are of dead people, created specifically to be put inside their tombs. I think that the blue eyes, a physical change that sometimes begins to occur even shortly before death, was seen by the ancient Egyptians as a sign that these men and women had entered the afterlife, that they had joined the gods and the ancestors in the blue sky among the stars. And even though blue-eyed tomb sculptures were rarely made after the Old Kingdom, the idea itself continued through the use of a symbol known as the Eye of Horus. The Eye of Horus represents well-being, health, healing, and protection. It derives from the mythical conflict between the god Horus and his rival Set. Here's the story. Set tore out one or both of Horus's eyes, but the god Thoth healed the eye, or eyes, and returned them to Horus. Horus subsequently offered them to his deceased father Osiris, who was thus sustained in the afterlife by the eye's revitalizing power. The Eye of Horus became an important funeral offering and was worn as an amulet by the living as well as by the dead for protection, the meaning of the Ka symbol as well. The Eye of Horus is often represented as blue or as surrounded by blue. The famous Turkish Nazar, often wrongly called an evil eye, is actually the protective eye and directly descended from the Eye of Horus. Those New Kingdom and Ptolemaic period mummy masks with the brilliant blue eyeliner and eyebrows, some even with blue eyes, reflect earlier religious beliefs going back some 3,000 years. Look familiar? So, I think it's time we quit arguing over the eye and skin color of the ancient Egyptians. Because even with portraits and DNA testing of mummies, we can never know for certain how any particular individual looked in life. Here are some facial reconstructions of famous Egyptians that I created for your consideration. We know through DNA testing that the Pharaoh Ramses III had sub-Saharan ancestry and was a black man. Did he look like this? Or this? But any facial reconstruction that looks anything like this is pure fantasy. His mummy, by the way, was the inspiration for Boris Karloff's makeup in the original Mummy movie. As for the unusual high-necked bandages, well, that's because Ramses III was murdered and his head nearly severed. Just some more interesting facts from the past. For the 10-Minute Professor, this is Dr. Susan Ray Euler. Thanks for tuning in.